It's all yours now.
I can't believe it. Are you really sure?
Aye, of course. I'm actually looking forward to the home, to be honest. You've been a great help to me these last 10 years, but it's time you had the place to yourself for all your editing and writing. And I'll be with all my old pals. I'm fed up having to be driven over to see them.
But I'll still be seeing you. Wednesday tea time and Saturday afternoon as we agreed. Are you sure that's enough?
Aye, of course. But there is one wee thing I would rather you do for me. And I'll warn you now, it'll take up quite little time you've got after your work. But it'll make good use of all your publishing skills, and maybe more.
Oh?
Well, do you remember what I said about Beatrix Potter? How she used to visit Kitty the washerwoman in the cottage up the road there when my granddad was wee?
Of course. And how she sent over a new book when she heard you'd been born.
Little Pig Robinson, a first edition. That's in there too. Aye, she was a great one for all the local gossip. My ma wrote her all the goings on. Anyways, 20 years ago, I bought myself this wee laptop as a retirement present. I thought maybe I could write a book or a film about her, but I didn't get that far. But I did find out some stuff, and there's a nice wee story in there, if I say so myself.
Sounds intriguing. I'd be delighted. I remember when I was wee and you took me to the Art Centre exhibit. Well, I couldn't believe how often she was up here.
Okay, they were here every year, July to October, until she was 16. Later on she came back to Dunkeld for a couple of summers as an adult. But anyway, it's all in there. See what you think. Here, I think that's my taxi now. Right, dinna get up. I'm old. No decrepit.
I haven't seen one of these for years. Scene 1, 1871, exterior, a train station. Charlie, there to pick up a mail sack off the train, is chatting to the station master as a couple and a 4-year-old girl disembark, followed by a small retinue of servants. Station master, that'll be the Potter family. The carriage is waiting to take them to Tullymet. They'll nae doubt hae a few letters to deliver there this summer. The little girl looks cautiously at the two men and beams a big smile before being hustled off by her parents. Their accents are a bit posh with hints of Lancastrian. Scene 2, 1873, same location. The girl, a little older, greets them politely by name. In a very proper accent, she says she can't wait to see Kitty and all her animal friends. Station master, and is it to be Tullymet or Dalguys this summer? Little girl, Dalguys again, I do like it there. Scene 3, another couple of years. She's taller and clutching a sketchbook, which she shows them. Well, Grandad, who knew you could do stuff like this? You can just imagine that on TV.
And Mr. McIntosh.
Miss Potter, welcome back. You'll have to excuse me, the post bag, you understand?
He seems to get more reserved every year. Oh, how wonderful it is to be back, Mr. Kinnaird, to be away from beastly London. This is my true home.
Aye, it's the first few years you've been coming now. 10?
So guys, 11. In fact, I have no memory of any summers other than those here. And for some of my menagerie, well, this is where they came from. Here come the lizards, Toby and Judy. The little box has Punch the Frog. And now it's Sally, our ring snake. Is everybody well?
Aye, indeed. Mr. Gaskell and Mr. Bright MP are already up at Dalgais, and Mr. and Mrs. Millie arrived a few weeks ago. He's been spied up the Hermitage and with his canvas. Aye, judging, he'll be in need of your father's photography, judging by the weather the last few days. Clear enough today, but I foresee it Pilton doing them on.
Papa has been teaching me how to use the camera. Perhaps I can take some of the pictures from which Mr. Muley can paint. He captures the brands so well, don't you think? Ah, here are the rabbits.
Aye, I've wrapped some of his canvases for the journey, and I can fair recognise the places. And how are your own pictures coming along? Last year you couldn't wait to show me, lass.
Miss Cameron currently has me working with watercolours. A little more tricky to do on the train, but I am happy with my renderings of flowers. I shall bring one for your office. Please be careful with Benjamin.
That would be much appreciated. Now, it looks like your family are all loaded and waiting on you, so I'd better be waving this train off.
Of course. Good day, Mr. Kinnaird.
Beatrix, when we get back to London, you will begin to attend afternoon functions with me. You'll be 16 next year. Soon it will be time to begin the process of finding a suitable marriage.
Mother, I have no interest in seeking a beau or any society visits of that matter. I'm content with my art and with my animals, and I intend to remain so.
Beatrix, we have obligations, dear, to shape society for the better. The success of your grandfathers in business and in improving workers' lives has given us much wealth, and with it great responsibility. We must continue higher, into the nobility, where the true power lies, if we are to change this country for the better. My father died before you were born, but he imparted to this family a great sense of duty, as did Rupert's, and you know well the esteem in which he is held. But perhaps you do not know the root of this. Rupert rarely draws attention to the matter.
I'm not sure what you mean, Mamma.
You recently read North and South, did you not? By Mr. Gaskell's late wife.
I did.
Do you recall a section? Here it is. Long after the creditors had given up hope of any payment of old Mr. Thornton's debts, this young man returned to Milton and quietly went around the creditors, repaying them the first instalment of the monies owing to them. No noise, no gathering together of creditors. It was all done very quietly and silently, but each was paid at last.
I remember this. Quite noble.
Well, Rupert's father did this in 1837, almost 20 years before Elizabeth wrote this book.
Was she writing about him?
No, of course not. It's a story. She made it up. But a writer will take examples from reality to create their tale. They will change the particulars to make a greater point. And they in turn inspire their readers to follow their lead.
I had no idea about grandfather and the creditors.
One of many such admirable deeds. Actions have consequences. They also provided welfare and education for their workforce. They drew the idea from here in Scotland, from Mr. Dale in nearby Stanley Mills and Mr. Owen, his partner in New Lanark. This is the stock from which you come, Beatrix. This is the responsibility we all bear. It is your duty to continue these values onwards, and more importantly, upwards, and take these on to a new generation.
I will do my best, Mamma.
Good day to you, Miss Beatrix. And what would Master Bertram be up to?
Kitty, I do believe he is searching for toads down by the burn. We return to London all too soon, and we can't find them down there. Oh, Kitty, we will be so sad to leave. I so hate the end of summer, the coming of winter, the leaving of Dogeyes.
I ken you day, lass, but you'll be back again soon enough.
I've been drawing another rabbit, Kitty. What do you think? What should I call him?
I dinna ken, but that's awfully good, Miss B. Uncle good indeed. I still have that fine caterpillar you drew for me. Ach, you were only a wee thing, 9 or 10 at least, but it was serial looking.
That day was so funny. Mr. Wood arrived with them in his hat, which was still on his head.
Mrs. Potter wouldna be so keen.
Mamma, no. They were crawling all over his ears and dropping into the antimacassars. But we soon gathered them in. They were a joy to draw, as they don't move very fast. But Kitty, this isn't your normal day to be here, is it?
Indeed not, Miss B. But I'd your favourite shirts to bring over. You know, the ones with RP sewn into them. I got them mixed up with RFs. An RF had got SPs instead. I may be an excellent clear starcher, but I was fair in the girdle the other day. True enough, BP had got RPs, but at least I ken knew what was war.
My goodness, that's quite a jumble, a veritable code. My apologies, dear Kitty, just a little trick I'm playing, swapping letters around like a spy to leave secret messages. What is that bird? Is it a buzzard?
It is indeed, Miss B. You're a clever girl to remember. Mind when you chummed me back to Inver and we saw Yin hovering, looking for his tea.
I so love it here, so many things to see in the sky, in the fields, rivers and lochs. And it's the proper habitat for all of my creatures, but Mamma insists I keep them upstairs. I've been trying to draw them, buzzards I mean, like the one in Mrs. Blackburn's book.
That book's fair kept you busy over the years.
Yes, and it's still my favourite, but I can never draw them as well as Mrs. Blackburn. I did a sketch of a serviceable horse earlier. It reminded me of one of Miss Mackenzie's Celtic folktales. Can you recall it, Kitty? The one about the girls and the horse and the name of Lochin?
Oh yes, it's well known around here, frae Fincastle way.
How Lochin na Nain got its name by Alexander Stewart of Chamberlain.
Indeed. Now, how does it go? 5 girls and 1 boy frae Fincastle went up to the loch to spend a little time there. The boy's mother put a testament into his pocket and off they went. When they were there, a speckled horse came to the loch, and one of the girls thought that she would ride on him. When she went up to the horse, he put his 2 knees down at the edge of the water. There was space for another girl, and she too mounted. There was plenty of room in the horse for all the girls, and soon all 5 were mounted on his back. But when all 5 of them were up there, the horse leapt into the water with them.
Oh no.
The boy ran home to tell the tale of what had happened to the girls, but when the parents returned, all they could see were little bits of their lungs floating in the water.
Yuck.
That's how the loch has got its name to this day. Loch na Nain, Loch of the Girls.
Well remembered, Kitty. Miss Mackenzie was very strict, but I so loved her Gaelic tales, ghost stories, fairy stories.
Oh, there's mony a tale to tell. How hills and lochs got their name, how children were births is away. How great kings were laid low by their own foolishness. How animals were turned into humans, and the other way about. Would you look across the field at that fine stag, chomping away like he was the Duke himself? The farmer will not be best pleased. Mind, he should maybe have brought in his harvest by now.
So fine a creature, a true monarch of the glen. Oh, Kitty, there's a fine painting of that name by Mr. Landseer. Papa took me to an exhibition in London. In fact, it was my very first time. I was amazed. The painting was huge. Landseers are quite in demand now. One foolish dealer sold 3 for £300, which were then resold the next day for £600.
£300 profit in one day? Why, that's 10 years' wages for farm labour, for pretty pictures. Mere money than sense. Well, I'll see you yet, afore you all gang awa, but if you'll excuse me for now, I'd best take BP to shirts. Your fathers are here now, and RF has got his. Muckle mere washing for me afore I can afford your Landseers. Maybe your caterpillar will keep me in my old age.
I'll do you another one, just in case. Or rabbits. Bye, Kitty. Now, Mr. Rabbit, you'd better be keeping your babies safe from Mr. Buzzard, or maybe he's after the poor field mice.
Should I know how we could hen? It's a bit chilly out.
I do believe you should have a coat. It's quite frosty now that autumn's here. There, how does that look? Ah, Nurse Mackenzie, the song she would sing with me in the nursery.
Aren't you afraid that Mama will read that? You know she wants you to.
Well, good luck to her. See? It's all in secret code. I've jumbled all the letters.
Oh, do tell. What does that letter stand for? And that one?
I'm sorry, dear brother, but that is my secret. I got the idea from Mother, as it happens. You know how she copies the newspapers on her braille machine so the blind can read them?
I still don't understand how that works. All the dots.
She showed me once. Each letter is given by a pattern of dots. So A is the top dot on the left-hand side, and B is the top 2 dots on the left-hand side, and so on. So A to J patterns are then repeated from K to T, but with an extra dot at the bottom.
Ah, so you have to learn what each pattern means.
Yes, but the first time I tried to read it and wrote it with my eyes closed, I missed the extra dot and muddled K as A and L as B and so on. And when I looked at what I'd written, I realised I had created a kind of secret code.
Ah, so that's C, M?
That, dear brother, would be too obvious. Even Mama could guess that. So I muddled things a bit more. And now I can even think in my code. It's rather like speaking French. And this, it's not that interesting. It's just my review of the troops back from Egypt.
It was in... Did you hear there were 8,000 men parading? It was in all the newspapers. I don't know why I wasn't allowed to watch.
The streets were very crowded. There was a large contingent of Scotch men, all in their tartan trews. Made me think it all, guys. So unfair that we couldn't go this year. Ray Castle was nice, but I missed Pershire so much. Kitty, Mr. Mackintosh the postie, Mr. Kinnaird at the train station, and the songs the travellers would sing up the road to the Bran.
Ah, the broom, the bonny, bonny broom, the broom o' the Calder knows. Fain would I be in my ain country, ere than my father's yows.
Oh, Bertie, how I wish to be back in the natural world. Did I tell you that Kitty and I saw a stag across the glen last year? I told her of Mr. Landseer's Monarch of the Glen and how much it sells for. She scoffed at the value city folk place on art. How shocked would she be to hear that Mr. Eaton MP has just bought it at Christie's for £6,200?
Is that a lot?
Quite, although some said before the sale it would fetch 10 to 15,000, but times are bad. Dear Kitty, how I long to see you again. It's so unfair about the guys. They've tripled the rent, and Papa thinks it's just too much. So much for growing up, Bertie was in Guys. You were still an infant when Sarah, our cook, stayed on to marry the gamekeeper, Duncan. Her fella, she called him.
Are they the ones we visited up in Tully Priory? She was nice.
Yes. So sad they had to leave Tullymet, but they had no further need for a gamekeeper there. The Scotch seem cruel that way. They are not as yet destitute. Father is still a trustee for her savings. She had £200 saved before the wedding. It now brings her a small income. How I remember the touch of her lilac silk wedding dress. I was 6 years old and we were up in the attic together at Guy's the night before she left. She sang me a song, one Duncan had sang to her at the end of the previous summer. I knew it already. I turned it at the time. I was out in the garden while Mamma and Papa arranged to recite it for their friends, and I spied them by the pillar. Very romantic, I suppose. They sang to the Scotch, of course. It's the music Mr. Mackintosh was playing in the drawing room.
Oh, but he been and gone, the summer folk then bide here long. Autumn comes and even you shift on, and all the words you say become a memory, just a summer song. An end old summer song.
It was so beautiful, although I didn't understand every word. I still think of this song, and of Guy's, every time I draw my pictures, and every autumn. Sarah once sent me a letter helpfully translating the song into Queen's English.
Everybody's been and gone. Summer guests never stay long. When autumn comes, even you move on, and all the words you say become memory. And the summer song, and the summer song. The grass is scorched, dust lies on the road to be. We shall walk a different road. It makes me sad to see you disappear, but I know I could not hold you. So many strangers pass by this year. I did miss them go, but for you I know my smile's not strong. Sing end of summer song. The sky's still blue, we must be wrong. The trees still green, summer must be strong. Why is it just the chill that comes the day that everybody finds so gray and says the summer's gone? Sing end of summer song.
Father, Mr. Neely.
Ah, this will suit my purposes wonderfully. Thank you both. You know, my landscapes have been selling very well of late, Rupert. But I do find it so much easier working in the studio from a photograph. Especially when the weather's as bad as this. I got absolutely soaked up at the Hermitage yesterday. And may I say, Miss Potter, that you have developed this print extremely well.
Papa has been generous with his advice.
Have you read of the latest Irish outrage? What will be blown up next? Government offices, indeed, in Parliament Street.
I'm seriously thinking, John, seriously thinking of moving us to Edinburgh. I blame Gladstone. When I took his photograph for your portrait, John, I didn't think much of the man. And everything he's done since has only made matters worse. His sympathies lie with these Irish rogues, and if he prevaricates, they just frighten him on a bit. Ludicrous fellow.
I read that the explosion was as loud as an 80-ton gun. We will be as bad as France soon, shan't we? There was a huge riot there. According to the newspapers, the soldiers barely controlled the mob, and there are fears for the 18th. Will the revolutionaries strike here, Papa?
Hush, child. Sometimes I regret introducing you to the Times. But I suppose these last few months has been so much unrest you could hardly avoid it. Why, they've even interrupted our visits to the galleries. Which reminds me, John, what do you think of the latest Rosettis?
Absolute rubbish. Why, all the people had goiters, for goodness sake. Rossetti never learnt drawing. He simply cannot draw. Why, Beatrix here easily surpasses him. My dear, many people can draw, but you, like my son John, have observation.
High praise indeed. Thank you, John. Actually, I was going to ask your advice for an art teacher. As you know, Beatrix does very well with pencil and watercolour, but we are thinking of a teacher for oils. Who would you advise?
Oh, that I had the patience to teach you myself, my dear. But I think you'd be better to have a female instructress, a professional artist. But there are all too few of those at the moment exhibiting oils. Now, let me think. Let me think. Mrs. Alma Tadema. Have you met her?
Oh, we do know them. Him rather than her. But we're not talking about him the other day, are you?
Yes, I saw his collection along with the Reynolds at the Academy.
She had some pithy comments on the matter, John. But right on the money, John. Right on the money.
Bravo. I'd best not solicit your opinions on my own work, my dear.
I have long been an admirer of your work, sir, and I have seen her work, of course.
Well, I'd better be getting off into this horrid evening.
You can have my coat.
I'll survive, but thank you very much.
How was John?
Oh, silly old fool. You should have taken my coat. It was a picture, though. He was in his bed, with his head all tied up with a huge handker-sneeze, playing a game by himself on a little board. He invited me to sit on his bed.
What a fellow!
Indeed. As I stumbled in the half-dark and trod on his slipper, I thanked him, but chose a chair instead. What made you of the exhibition at Tooth and Maclean's?
Disappointing. Even Mr. Relay's 3 works were not of his best, though head and shoulders above the rest. The one on Bond Street, The Captive, was painted last spring. He took a long time with it. I admired the dress and the dish with lemons, but the faces lacked expression, too brightly pink, too delicate coloured. The same is true in the painting of Olivia. Her dress is wonderful, unlike her hair. Light golden red usually shines instead of being soft. I cared even less for the stowaway, some strong painting in the face, but no breadth of colour, light or shadow. Mr. Millay hardly ever paints with a dark background. Perhaps he's not quite at home with it.
He was right to be cautious of your opinion the other day about what a fine scholar of art you're becoming.
Mother, this is what I wanted to discuss with you. Why must you appoint Miss Carter? I am not a child anymore. If Bertie is going off to school, why cannot I enter formal education too? Miss Hammond left because she has nothing more to teach me. Why do I need another governess? I would better study at the College of Art.
Beatrix, your primary duty is to make a fine match. Miss Annie Carter will tutor you in German and other essentials, and as she is but 3 years older than you, she will be a lady's companion. We have the money that would enable you to marry into the nobility, with all the benefits that would bestow upon you, on the whole family, on society as a whole. Need I remind you of your grandfather's sacrifices? Actions have consequences, for good or ill. There's many a future resident of the House of Lords in sore need of the funds to maintain their castles.
I tire of this, Mother. Other young women are encouraged into formal education, even to Oxford, at Lady Margaret Hall, Somerville Hall, and AEW. Did not Miss Cameron, before she too abandoned me, guide me through my art certificate and suggest that I was well prepared to progress further?
I pray you, daughter, do not run before you can walk. We are happy for you to continue working on your art, and indeed, we have engaged Mrs. A for a series of lessons. Let me tell you, he's crossed a pretty penny indeed. And I wouldn't deny the importance of German in furthering your studies of the old masters, and indeed your interest in botany.
I shall give Miss Carter every chance.
Helen, Beatrix, I bring sad news from Oxford. Mr. Steindl tells me that Mr. Gaskell passed away at 5 a.m. yesterday.
Oh, how sad! And what a dear friend he has been. What an awful year we have had, Rupert. Your father, Uncle Crumpton, my mother.
Dear old man, I feared for him when we saw him last in March. If anyone has led a blameless, peaceful life, it was he. Another friend gone to rest. How few are left.
And the funeral?
The day after tomorrow in Knutsford. He is to lie with his dear wife, Elizabeth. I'm sorry, but we will not be able to attend. I've checked the travel arrangements, and it is impossible.
France?
Indeed. Perhaps you could aid me in the choice, my dear. I have a lad waiting at the door for instructions to the florist. Excuse us, Beatrix.
Dear kind Mr. Gaskell, there has always been a deep childlike affection between him and me. The memory of it is one of past lights bound up for the old home. Oh, how plainly I see it again. He is sitting comfortably in the warm sunshine on the doorstep at Dalgais, in his grey coat and felt hat. The newspaper lies on his knee. Suddenly he looks up. There are sounds of pounding footsteps. The blue bottles whiz off the path. A little girl in a print frock and striped stockings bounds to his side and offers him a bunch of meadowsweet. He just says thank you, dear, and puts his arm around her. The bees hum around the flowers. The air is laden with the smell of roses. Sandy lies in his accustomed place against the doorstep. Shall I really never see him again?
Oh, the broom, the bonny, bonny broom, the broom of the counter down. Clean wood I weave my country broom, there in my fingers young. How blind was I each morning,
Dankeschön, Elizabeth.
Vielen Dank, Elizabeth. Bitte schön, Frau Carter.
Lass the Frau bitte. Fraulein would do quite nicely.
Oh, you are so much older, more worldly experienced than I would never have dared to ask Elizabeth to serve us here, in the drawing room.
But that is my job, my dear students. I am here to tutor in adult behaviour and conversation. Where better to do that than your own family drawing room? We could hardly discourse about the world in your childhood playroom, not without half a dozen creatures crawling up my legs. Those lizards, Beatrix. That snake was the limit.
Oh, he's only Bertie's ring snake. He asked me to bring him here while the others stayed on at Campfield.
How was your art lesson? We certainly bought some fine materials on Saturday.
And I thank you for your assistance. My class with Miss A. I am uncertain what to say about it. Please don't tell anyone, but I fear I don't much like it, which is rather disappointing.
Unfortunate.
Indeed. I wish it did not cost so much. Is Papa really throwing it away? Will it even do me harm?
How so?
I would rather use English colours than those she recommends, and Lindsay doll, horrid sticky stuff. She used Bitchmum in her own big painting anyway. She seems to have 3 painting styles. Seinen Deutsch?
Ihr Deutschen still.
Yeah, her best, strong, though somewhat hard. French Französischer still?
Ja, gut.
Sentimental and rather contemptible. I don't like French art as a rule. And lastly, her woollier version of the French with the pinkness of English go. She draws and paints pretty well, but I don't like it. It's as smooth as a plate, colour, light, drawing, shade, and sentiment. I don't want to catch it by copying her. Perhaps myself will regard me here instead of, as usual, getting me into further scrapes. But it is tiresome. One finally gets lessons, but those I dislike, and I must swallow my feelings out of considerations at home.
Persevere, dear Beatrix, persevere. The hardest part of learning is realising what you do not know. Your self-will shall prevail, I have no doubt at all.
I suppose Miss A is very kind and attentive. She hardly lets me do anything.
When does your mother return from her trip? I'd love to find out the plans for summer.
Mamma should be back tomorrow. Quite uncertain for the summer. I'm afraid there may be a chance of going back to Dunkeld.
Afraid? But I thought you loved it.
It seems extraordinary to dislike the idea, but the memory of that home is the only bit of childhood I have left.
But you fear it may now be changed?
Indeed, and myself more so. I was a child back then, knowing nothing of the world. Everything was romantic. The woods were peopled by the mysterious good folk. The lords and ladies of past century walked with me along the overgrown paths and picked the old-fashioned flowers among the box and rose hedges of the garden. I lived in a world of my own fancies, and just to lose it all as childhood ends, my first great sorrow.
But don't you think it could still be the same?
I would rather remember it with the sun sinking, showing behind the mountains, the purple shadows creeping down the ravines into the valley to meet the white mist rising from the river.
As you get older, you will realise that every ending is an opportunity to start again, just as every Dunkeld autumn has been. Every summer you've returned, older, knowing more, finding more. Everything is decaying, and nothing good is remaining. It's a reminder, it's the time to begin. When you feel the temperatures dip, and high
My word, Helen.
What is it, dear?
My sister Mary writes of Kate's engagement to one Captain Cruikshank, late of the army, now a stockbroker, and by no means rich.
How awful! And you have treated Kate and Blanche as if they were your own daughters. Your father would have been horrified. Actions have consequences.
Mary should have nipped this in the bud.
With such a beautiful daughter, she should have married her well, even into fashionable society, or one of those rich and respectable Unitarian families. When you took her to see Lord John Manners, she made a great impression. You don't realise this will harden Beatrix's heart even further against ever marrying. I fear we shall never find our way into the cream of society. What an ungrateful daughter.
Oh, Patience, my dear. Her 19th birthday party was a great success, and she glowed at the society ball, thanks to the kindness of John Millie in inviting us all. But I do know what she'll say when she hears this news.
Not that I in the least consider position or wealth to be the great objects of life, though I am sure they'd be more necessary for Kate's happiness than they would be for mine. Too much money is an evil in most hands, and too little is a sore trial. I'm no Cinderella, I'm no Sleeping Beauty, I'm not looking for the right kind of fellow. I won't marry out of duty. I can't sing the poetry. An elegant debutante isn't me. I'd rather inhabit biology, digging around in geology. I want to live in the natural world. I want to live the barks and the tweets, the bars and the bleeds. I want to live in the natural world. I want to live in the natural world, far away from their airs and their graces, their airs and their graces. I don't want all of this finery, bustles and chiffon and corsetry. Just leave me alone with my botany. Let me discover my ecology. I want to live in the natural world. I want to live in the natural world. The snuffles and the purrs, the rowans and the furs. I want to live in the natural world. I want to live in the natural world, far away from their airs and their graces, their airs and their graces. I want to live in the natural world. I want to live in the natural world. I want to live in the natural world.
And so, 2 years ago in May, me and Bertie struck a deal with Hildesheimer and Faulkner for the not inconsequential sum of £6. This all started with a Christmas card. You'll remember, Lucy. To under the breakfast plates 2 years ago.
I had forgotten all that, but when my dear niece reminded me, I told her any publisher would snap them up.
They had set their minds on a printing machine of their own, price £16 if you please. Of course, I could have bought it for them, but I wanted to encourage her in the independence that she was developing. I hope some of it rubs off on Bertie.
I sometimes wonder if you want her to find a husband. The world is changing. Our gender are increasingly admitted to universities and more of the scientific societies. We live in changing times. Why, some are even calling for the working man without property to also have the vote. Even women too. Ridiculous.
Coming back to the subject, Bee prepared her 6 designs using Benjamin Bouncer as her artist's model.
How on earth did you get it to stand still?
Oh, I believe she is in the habit of feeding it hemp seeds, which makes for a rather sleepy bunny.
Hair. I had noticed her preoccupation with the topic in chapel of all places, but my inquiries garnered scant response.
Oh, your curiosity gets the better of you sometimes. Bee and Bertie then obtained the addresses of no less than 5 publishers and sent them first to Wards, who responded with a peremptory refusal. Undaunted, when he was coming through town for his Oxford exam, Bertie persuaded Bee to try Hildesheimer and Faulkner.
And I was a witness to what happened next.
Indeed. A cheque for £6 paid out to Bertie, which Bee didn't disclose to anyone until she had got the company to correct the error. Then Harry takes Bee into London in his fly to visit the offices.
A curious cove, our Mr. Faulkner. Harry did most of the talking to begin with, but Bee entered more and more into the conversation. A funny little place too, the office of a warehouse. Just enough room to get in between the door and the staircase, innumerable desks, pigeonholes, parcels. Harry thought Faulkner was playing his cards a bit too close to his chest to begin with, and Beatrix was clearly troubled when Faulkner stepped out to discuss the sketches with his colleagues.
I think she was afraid they would mock her work.
But when Faulkner returned, he was full of sensible suggestions. He suggested that she try the zoological gardens for her sketches. He plainly welcomes further submissions.
And these have flowed and appeared in print, followed by further payments. So you see, Helen, not only does she have a talent that is of value to publishers, but she is developing a steady income of her own.
But if she does that, what man will ever want to marry her? You two reprobates may be having your fun, seeing your pet project grow wings, but I fear for her and our future. Actions have
consequences, yes, my dear. But now that Miss Carter has become Mrs. Moore and is hatching babies at a tremendous rate, that will maybe focus her mind. I know that she writes regularly to the children, Noel, Eric and the girls, and many of her pictures start life as rough sketches in these letters. And I believe she also makes up stories which enthrall the children. We may yet become grandparents, my dear. We are very pleased to welcome you to stay in Eastwood Hall this summer
and I hope you will find everything to your satisfaction. It's absolutely grand to have the Potter family staying in Dunkeld and not in yon offy place beside the railway station across the river.
Ah, yes, the good Duke, or was it his father, would not have the railway on his property. Is he a hard taskmaster, Mr. McGregor?
His Grace is very pleasant to work with, and he interferes not at all in the running of Eastwood.
Mr. Charles McGregor to see you, Mr. Potter.
Is it that time already? Please show him in, Elizabeth. Charlie and I have a lot to catch up on. He's been very impressed with these studies of fungi. The two of them have been exchanging samples and sketches throughout the winter.
Ah, yes. A man of many parts is our Charlie, and now indeed an associate member of the Perthshire Society of Natural Sciences. Quite a renowned local botanist. No longer Charlie the Postie.
Mr. Potter, Mr. McGregor, I trust I find you both well.
Hale and hearty, thank you, Charlie. But come. We're all man for man here, as the bard has said. Let us not be so formal. Rupert?
Aye, good day to you, Charlie. And as our good landlord commands, please do just call me Rupert, Charlie.
Well, my business here is done, so I'll leave you to your talk of mushrooms. I feel a little hunger coming on at the very mention of them.
Please, do take a seat, Charlie.
McGregor is a bit of an old rogue. I don't mind, sir, going back to more formal conversation.
No, he is quite right. This is 1893, for goodness sake, and we've known each other for at least 20 years. And, by the way, thank you for arranging B to meet many fellow members of your society, and also for providing that which enabled B to impress the curators of the Natural History Museum.
And I too appreciate your help, sir, with sending the Stevenson volumes, Hymenomycetes Britannicae, which I consult daily in identifying specimens. Miss Potter proved herself a braw botanist and a hard-working student, and she's going near the stage where Kew Gardens none bidder welcome. I brought this wee newspaper clipping that was sent to us from the Worcestershire Society. I thought Miss Potter might be interested in it. It refers to yon rare fungi that she found last year. Deserves special mention because it has been so seldom observed that Shrawley Wood is one of the few localities where it has been found. This is what has been named Strobylomyces strobylacus, a member of the Belletti family, of a black hue and whose pilus is covered with floccus scales. Here and Crieff are the only other places where I ken it's been found. Miss Potter's first sketches were excellent, but if she was to find it again, and only this time do your braw watercolours in situ, ken, that would fair impress the Perthshire Society. I ken the scientists at Kew can't normally abide women folk, but it might just open a few doors for her there too.
Thank you, Charlie. I will give it to B the moment she returns from her drive along the Bran. But what you say about Kew is good to know. My brother Harry, I believe you've seen him up here before, the MP. He's more of a chemist, but he takes an avuncular interest in B's scientific studies. And if this can put a foot in the door, then he can provide the force. Now, to business. When you return from your wee trip, you, I and Mr. Mackenzie will take our cameras into the hills, together with a fine gentleman's picnic, and we will take photographs of some of your observations to recall. And this is partly to thank you and Mr. Mackenzie for the book of pressed ferns which so beguiled my daughter, and also to celebrate your associate membership of the society.
Ah, thank you. That would be grand, sir. Rupert, thank you.
And another thing, if there are any other books which I could send up that may help you and your fellow mycologists in identifying specimens or whatnot, then...
Oh, goodness me, that would be a rare help indeed, sir. I can't think of anything specific to know, but they were talking at the Society of more recent publications in the Reverends. I'll ask some of the others and I'll write you some suggestions. Thank you very much, sir. It's muckle kind of you.
My absolute pleasure. And not a word to be for now. I'd like to keep it as a surprise.
Here it is! Majority rejoicings at Blair Castle, consequent on the coming of age of the Marquis of Tullybarton, eldest son of the Duke of Athol, Katie, Lord Lieutenant of Berkshire, an event which was duly honoured at the time. A garden party was held at Blair Castle on Saturday afternoon, and we were there, Rupert.
Indeed we were, dear. Now, Beatrix, you can see the
Now, where
shutter.
are we? Ferguson, Lord and Lady Kinloch, Mr. and Mrs. Mackenzie, Mr. Pilkington, and family, and Mr. and Mrs. Patton, Mr. and Mrs. Panton, Mr. R. Gamble Preston, and Mr. and Miss Partington, Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, and family, down Nagler. Mr. and Mrs. Rupert Potter is to Dunkeld. And you could have been there too, Beatrix.
Mother.
How on earth will you ever find a husband if you don't take these opportunities? I mean, look at this guest list. Sir J and Lady Ramsay and family Banff.
Oh, Ramsay of Banff. Oh, I thought that was him. I should have said hello.
Have you taken his picture as well, Father?
Professor and Mrs. Ramsay and family Loyal. Mr. and Mrs. Neil Robertson, Dunfermline, Lieutenant General and Miss Clark Rattray of Craig Hall.
No, my dear. James, I knew him at Lincoln's Inn when he was an apprentice. He's a 10th baronet now.
Mr. and Mrs. and Miss Clark Rattray are back.
Called to the bar a few years after me, but I don't believe he ever practiced.
Mr. and Mrs. Rennie Darrich.
Nice fellow, but I think he was more interested in history than law.
Rather like you in photography, Father.
Colonel and Lady Maud Rice and family devoured.
Perhaps be, but you might know his daughter, Catherine, Kitty. She started at the Royal Academy of Music about a year ago.
Next to the museum. I must pass her each day.
What jolly strange place names the Scotch have. Belassy? Pitfowler?
I believe you each visit the public gallery on the House of Commons.
Occasionally, though, like you, I've grown to detest Gladstone. Miss Ramsay, short little thing, about Bertie's age. Yes, I do believe we were introduced once. A promising composer, I'm told. As frustrating a field for a woman as science, I'd imagine.
Ouch leaks. Edradinate. Colquhoun Halsey.
Edradinate and Colquhoun, my dear. My dear, there must be at least 300 names there. It was a very pleasant afternoon, bar a shower when we were inopportunely in Diana's Grove. But I sincerely doubt there would have been anything to interest Beatrix. Although when we were sheltering from the rain in the woods, there were some peculiar specimens. Some very peculiar fungi, Beatrix.
Durnanian Finnegar.
Papa, I am awash with fine opportunities in the gardens here at Eastwood, and Mr. Mackintosh has provided more very useful knowledge in our search for Strombolomyces strobulaceus.
Alchroski Valnerki. I do not approve of you spending time with Mr. Mackintosh. In fact, I do not approve of you spending any time in the company of a man old enough to be your father. Actions have consequences. There's plenty titled young men in the area. There's...
Oh, Mother, you liked Charlie fine enough when he was our postie, and I can assure you I have not the least romantic inclinations towards him, nor indeed Bardi or anyone else, nor he towards me. Although he does carry on perennial courtships, which never come to anything. Either the ladies refuse him, or more likely, he never asks them. Oh, and Mama, knowing your delight in local going-ons, you might want to pay a visit to our old washerwoman Kitty, over in Inver. She was in great fettle on the subject of old Mrs. McLeish. Since her husband died, Mrs. McLeish has lived alone in the old cottage with the little dogs. He's a good dog to me. Some people think she's slightly crazy. She is cheerfully demonstrative, talks at the top of her voice, but does tend to thump one on the back. I got into great favour photographing her dogs. Apparently, when the old Duchess with two of her granddaughters went to the cottage, Mrs. McLeish asked, "Which of you young ladies is the one that's going to marry your young laird?" Well, if local gossip is true, well, that nice-looking Mr. Fotheringham once one of the young ones, but His Grace wants first to marry off the eldest, who is plain and rather peculiar. But they say she hopes for the scamp who is Sir Robert Mingy's son. And there's another rumour that Bardi is to marry Miss Bass, who may be charming as well as an heiress. Future second Baroness Burton, Mamma. Well, it's not thought to be romantic.
Real Claude Fingask.
Dare say every one of these persons will marry somebody else, but not me. I grant you, however, that the Athol family is exceedingly popular, and Lord Tullibardine is very well spoken of after his unplanned dismount at the York's wedding. How was he, by the by?
Still indisposed after 2 months. He's been in the bath chair for 2 months, but he's well on the mend.
H-Bra Tully Power.
Nasty business to fall off your horse, and just as the Duke and Duchess passed by.
Landed on his cuirass. Nasty cut and a bad jolt to the spine.
The papers reported that it was more serious than first reported, but a full recovery is expected.
There was a fine gaggle of young ladies hanging on his every word and having a fine time pushing him hither and thither, but he seemed to be in no hurry to make a selection.
Hush, Papa. We shall have no more about bachelors and their eligibility. Have I all I need to know to take this fine contraption down into the woods? I so want to capture Strombolomyces strobulaceus before Charlie arrives. And that looks almost perfect. Oh, Charlie, wait until you see Strombolomyces strobulaceus. I knew I could find it again.
I must write him instructions on where he can locate it. Oh, Benjamin, such a shy man, but how he comes alive on this subject. Ah, dear Charlie, our old postie. I was so lucky to have drawn several rare species before meeting him again, now as an adult. Long before you were born, Benjamin, I would be sent to pick up the post as he passed Dalgais. I used to hop from puddle to puddle on the strides of his hobnailed boots. When I first met him again as an adult, 'twould be hard to imagine a more scared, startled scarecrow. A long wisp of whisker blowing over either shoulder, a drip from his hat or his nose, watery eyes fixed on the puddles or anywhere but another traveller's face. He was certainly pleased with my drawings. He praised my accuracy. He noticed the most minute botanical points. He is the perfect dragon of erudition, and not gardener's Latin either.
But now, Benjamin, am I not able to capture them fresh and full of colour? I do hope he is happy, and if he is, I'm sure the Perthshire Society of Natural Science will be too. It's from Annie. Oh, I hope the scamps are well. Oh, poor Noel. Scarlet fever. Benjamin Bouncer, Noel is pertly. What say we cheer him up with a letter? With a story? What's that, Benjamin? Oh, I will of course disguise your identity. Perhaps we could tell him about your new cousin Peter? My dear Noel, I don't know what to write to you, so I shall tell you a story about 4 little rabbits, whose names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived in a sandbank with their mother under the root of a big fir tree.
Now, my dears, you may go into the field or down the lane, but you may not go into Mr. McGregor's garden.
Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, ran down the lane to gather some blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight to Mr. McGregor's garden and slipped under the gate. First, he ate some lettuces, then some broad beans, and then some radishes. Then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom would he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was planting out young cabbages when he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving his wake and shouting out,
"Stop! Thief!"
Peter was most dreadfully frightened and ran all round the garden, for he had forgotten his way back to the gate. He lost one shoe among the cabbages and another shoe amongst the potatoes. Then, after losing them all, he ran on all fours and went even faster, though I thought he'd got away altogether, if he hadn't unfortunately got caught in the gooseberry net with the button on his jacket. Mr. McGregor came up with a basket, which he had intended to put on top of Peter's head. But Peter managed to escape and wriggle out just in time, leaving his jacket behind. He found the gate, sneaked underneath, and ran home safe. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. I'm sorry to say, but Peter was feeling rather poorly that night, and Mother put him to bed with 1 tablespoon of chamomile tea. 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, they had bread, milk, and blackberries for supper. I shall be back to London on Thursday. I hope I will see you soon, and the new baby. I remain, yours sincerely, Beatrix Potter. Oh, Benjamin, was that not a grand story for Noel yesterday? But perhaps little Eric will feel left out. I must make amends, mustn't I? My dear Eric, once upon a time, there was a frog called Mr. Jeremy Fisher, and he lived in a little house on the side of a riverbank. One morning, he looked out and saw drops of rain.
I will get some worms and go fishing and catch a dish of minnows for my dinner, said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. If I catch more than 5 fish, I will invite my friends Mr. Alderman Tommy Tortoise and Sir Isaac Newton. The Alderman, however, eats salad. Mr. Jeremy put on a mackintosh and a pair of shiny galoshes. He took his rod and his basket and set off with enormous hops to the place where he kept his boat. The boat was round and green and very like the other lily leaves. It was tied to a water plant in the middle of the pond. Mr. Jeremy took a reed pole and pushed the boat out into the open water. I know a good place for minnows, said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. Mr. Jeremy stuck his pole into the mud and fastened the boat to it. Then he settled himself cross-legged and arranged his fishing tackle. He had the dearest little red float. His rod was a tough stalk of grass. His line was a fine, long, white horsehair, and he tied a little wriggling worm at the end. The rain ran down his back, and for nearly an hour he stared at the float. This is getting tiresome. I think I should have some lunch, said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. He punted back again amongst the water plants and took some lunch out of his basket. I will eat a butterfly sandwich and wait until the shower is over, said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. A great big water beetle came up underneath the lily leaf and tweaked the toe of one of his galoshes. Mr. Jeremy crossed his legs up shorter, out of reach, and went on eating his sandwich. Once or twice, something moved about with a rustle and a splash amongst the rushes at the side of the pond. I trust that is not a rat, said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. I think I had better get away from here. Mr. Jeremy shoved the boat out again a little way and dropped the bait. There was a bite almost directly. The float gave a tremendous bobbit. A minnow! A minnow! I have him by the nose, cried Mr. Jeremy Fisher, jerking up his rod. But what a horrible surprise! Instead of a smooth, fat minnow, Mr. Jeremy landed a little jack shark stickleback covered with spines. The stickleback floundered about the boat, creaking and snapping until he was quite out of breath. Then he jumped back into the water, and a shoal of other little fishes put their head out and laughed at Mr. Jeremy Fisher. He scrambled out on the first bank he came to, and he hopped across the meadow with his mackintosh all in tatters. What a mercy that was not a pike, said Mr. Jeremy Fisher. I have lost my rod and basket, but it does not much matter, for I am sure I should never have dared go fishing again. He put some sticking plaster on his fingers, and his friends both came for dinner. He could not offer them fish, revealed something else in his larder. Sir Isaac Newton wore his black and gold waistcoat, and Mr. Alderman Tommy Tortoise brought a salad with him in a string bag. And instead of a nice dish of minnows, they had roasted grasshopper with ladybird sauce, which frogs consider a beautiful treat, but I think must have been nasty.
Of course. Now I must send a letter to Frida. Tomorrow, perhaps, Benjamin. I've had a reply from Ernest Leister.
The fine art publishers about your booklet?
Yes, a frog hue and a fishing go. Although they're more interested in my sketches and using it for their own children's comical characters or some such. Anyway, it would be acceptable if only they would agree a price that I asked.
What are they offering?
A guinea for 9 drawings. I asked for 25 shillings for the original 10, or 20 shillings for 8.
22 shillings and sixpence would be the price you expect. I think you should play straight back, dear. A short, polite, but terse letter, requesting the return of your drawings if they're unwilling to meet your price. I think you'll find they'll stump up the final 1 shilling and sixpence.
I shall write to them immediately. They've agreed!
Ah!
Dear Sir, Sir H. Roscoe sent me to ask whether you would be kind enough to look at some of my fungus drawings, which he is interested in. I do not quite like to give the paper to Mr. Massey, because I'm afraid I have rather contradicted him. Uncle Harry is satisfied with the way of my workings, but we wish very much that someone would take it up at Kew, to try it, if they do not believe my drawings. Mr. Massey took objection to my slides, but the things exist and will all be done by the Germans. It is rather a long paper to ask you to be kind enough to read. I remain, sir, yours sincerely, Beatrix Potter.
Well, my dear, it would appear that you've set the cat amongst the aspidistras over at Kew.
Oh, Uncle Harry, I fear I may have presumed too much with Mr. Thistleton Dyer.
Oh, he is but a priggish oaf. I have told him as much. Why his backwater of science is the last to accept female participation is nonsense. Why only today I was discussing the works of Madame Curie with members of my chemical faculty. Now, my dear, in my experience, ignore the buffoons in charge and change the minds of the individual researchers. And that is precisely what you have done with Mr. Massey.
Mr. Massey? But I thought I had contradicted him and surely offended him. His note directed me to Brayfield's 10 volumes in German as though to daunt me. And then, when I devoured these and remonstrated with him at Kew, he had admitted he hadn't even read them himself. It's plain he thinks I'm a nuisance.
Ah, contraire, my chérie Beatrix. In fact, he is now an enthusiastic proponent of your hypotheses and has urged you to draft a letter which he will read on your behalf to the Linnean Society.
A paper on the germination of spores of Agaricinae. I might not present the paper myself?
Another foolish backwater. Unlike the botany and zoological societies, they, as yet, do not accept women.
But a paper. How will I write it? What would I even call it?
Well, you mentioned a title just a moment ago, but that will take several months. In the meantime, I would urge you to contact your friendly Scotch postman and seek further samples from him.
To Charles McIntosh, do you think you could get me fungus called Corticium amorphum? It grows on fir bark and looks at first like Lachnea calycinea, but afterwards sticky like Dacromyces. Also, I should be very much obliged if you could give me any information about Morelius corseum. You told me some time since that you have not found it at Dunkeld with properly developed spore. Do you mean every season or only in unfavourable seasons? Have you noticed the same thing with any other fungus? For instance, Chlorosplenium aerogenesum. I am doing some curious work with fungus spore, trying to draw up a paper with the assistance of my uncle Sir H. Roscoe.
Intermediate species. I wonder if he...
Have you ever suspected that there are intermediate species amongst Agarics and Boletti? We are strongly of the opinion, for certain good reasons, that there are mixed fungi. That is to say, either growing actually upon mixed network of mycelium, or else hybrid species which have originated in that way. I do not express any opinion which way, only that they are intermediate. Of course, such an idea is contrary to the books, except for lichens, but I should be curious to hear whether you had difficulty in naming any of the sorts, which I suspect. Have you noticed whether fungi described as varieties are constant in type? For instance, does A. Aurus var. Vahali come up the same every season and all the season? I mean to say, are there poor specimens towards the end of the season, more like the ordinary A. aurorus?
Careful. Careful.
I do not mean to suggest the idea if you have not noticed it yourself. It may be a different species, not a var at all. I have found a fungus very like A. velotypes, which Sir Henry thinks is either a mixture or a new sort. There is no harm in giving an opinion, so long as it is made clear whether it is only an opinion or the result of an observation. We find some people make theories out of dried specimens without the least experience of the way things grow. If you find Corticium, would you please wrap it up as soon as you find it, to keep the spore separate? If you take any interest in physiology, I should be amused to send a copy later on. I have got into contradictions at Kew and the British Museum already, but I think my uncle is a good judge.
Lichens. What could I ask him about lichens? Do you know anything about lichens? Beatrix Potter. I have come to the conclusion, Uncle Harry, and you're not going to like it. I have decided to cease work on my Linnaean paper.
It was well received. It's one thing to withdraw until you complete further experiments.
Up until a point, Uncle, but I feel I would need proper laboratory facilities. Growing spores in our scullery makes me unpopular with the staff, and as you know, with Mr. Pasteur's work, it's too prone to cross-contamination. I know I am right about the symbiotic natures of lichens and the hybridization of fungi. I know this will all be proved in years, if not months to come.
Why stop now? Science is filled with disappointments and setbacks, but truth will out.
I fear combining mycology with my illustration work is not good for my health, Uncle. I have prepared the tales of Peter Rabbit as an illustration children's book.
You have a publisher?
No, not yet, Uncle. They like my sketches and my stories, but they press me to illustrate in colour. And as you know, it is most time-consuming. I simply don't have the time to do it all.
Then you must follow your heart. Perhaps you're just a handful of years too early to make your contribution to science, but you have a fine mind and a grand understanding of nature. I'm convinced that within 10 years, women will be admitted into these societies, and your illustrations of fungi are already canonical. I gather textbooks are considering their inclusion.
Indeed, although I fear they would be rather dull books to all except experts.
That is the nature of scientific text, my dear. In that case, echoing that song that you love so well, raise your glass one final time. Drink now, we have stripped this wine. Time to make this summer's wine.
You've been so good, been so true. I've learned so much from you.
But as you leave, I see what you must do to catch control the winter through.
This is the first time in my life that the sun has shone. End of summer song.
It's a bitter time, but I must carry on, sing end of summer song.
End of summer song. These do look fine, Father, but I thought it's best you check.
I have every confidence that you are correct, my dear. What a masterstroke it was to print the first edition yourself and to sell all 200 copies so quickly.
Mr. Conan Doyle's endorsement was most unexpected, but has surely helped.
I rather think the quality of your book had more to do with it. So, the big discussion is colour and black and white and the selling price of the book.
Well, Mr. Warren has convinced me on the merit of colour and page count, so these are no longer issues, nor is the sale price. We have agreed 1 6p with a royalty of 3p per book. I want to make these books as affordable to as many children as possible, and I would be willing to forgo some royalty to that end, but only in the short term. I need to retain the rights in case the publisher decides not to print a second edition. And I specifically want to retain the rights to the image of Peter Rabbit, so that I can commission toys and other dolls.
In that case, Bea, I do think this contract is suitable for signing. It's hard to believe that nearly 10 years has elapsed since you wrote to the Moore children. Do you recall? That was the week that Helen read out our names from the Dundee Courier's account of Bardi's coming out.
And now he has married Miss Ramsay, the daughter of your former colleague. There's been wars in Africa, Irish revolts. Our dear Queen has seen so much over so many years. What unsettling times we have lived in. I wonder what the next century will hold.
Oh, more wars, sadly, but progress too, and not just in technical inventions, although these will come thick and fast. I see you're introducing improved farming methods to Sori.
There is so much to learn, combining local knowledge and wisdom with scientific results from around the world. As summer ends each year, we can look back with satisfaction on what we have harvested. We can note the circumstances with which we could have dealt better, and we can learn new discoveries on how to replace wasteful ways. Curiosity is key, Father. If my books can achieve any purpose, I hope they challenge children to be curious about the natural world, to understand the consequences of actions, and to see the connection between how nature behaves and how we can build a better world. Annie was right about endings being beginnings, just as you and Mother were with providing me with her in the first place. When nothing good is remaining and everything is decaying, it's a reminder it's time to begin. When you feel
naughty, naughty,